Welcome back to the Swag Shack. This is Swag, and on today's episode, we are going to look at these beautiful cliffs around the build. So, the big thing is landscaping is very important to helping your park feel more smooth. It's hard to say. When you're building a game in which your land tool is blocks, it's hard to get away from that, the 90-degree sharp corners. There are certain techniques we can use to help that a little bit, like scenery pieces and such. Big use of the volcano piece, which I've already got on the new save. I've already started working on it. Just wanted to ground myself a little bit and see how things have gone in the past. So the problem with a cliffside like this is it does feel like the land tiles were just randomly pushed down. Not a whole lot of thought. You're like, I want a cliff, I want water down at the bottom, and that's sort of it. There looks to be little to no effort involved in that, to me, pulls away from the believability and just the leisure at which you are viewing the park. So, no hate on Wes. It's not easy to do. I'm going to figure it out as I go. You'll be watching me do it at like 16 times speed, so it might take a lot longer than you might expect, but it's worth it. It really is worth it. Sometimes you're making this look so much better with that work involved. Once you know how to do it, you kind of just copy and paste over and over again and try to make it look as natural as possible. So I'm going to get to it. You guys enjoy, and we'll talk to you after. So we have done basically, what would you call this, like 75% of the walls. So just copy and pasting different parts of the volcano piece. As you can see, there's different parts. And then, of course, from different perspectives, they show different parts of the volcano. So you got to check it from different angles to make sure it's not having a bunch of areas poke up. Like you can kind of see these two pieces poking up. Your eyes aren't drawn to that location, so don't worry about it too much. The biggest takeaway I have from doing this is the amount of height you do from your cliff. So let's just say from the areas we haven't done yet. The amount of height between this tile and this tile is just too much. If you want it to make it look more natural, you need to have tiers of drops. So like have two different tiers of drops like that. So you'd have walls here and walls here to make it look a little bit more organic. I'll show off some other parks in this video really quick to show you what I'm talking about. So I also will finish this side in another time lapse. But if you go to the timeline, no, not timeline, the Grand Glacier title sequence park, you'll see a lot of these volcano rocks used as textures for larger gap so you can see that wall, how big it is. But when you put these rocks into that area, it fills the gap and makes it look a lot more natural. It's used in other areas like this with a giant mound. If you were to take the vegetation and you can see that there's tiers to this to make it look more natural. I will say in this circumstance, this is actually a pretty big hill and feels a little unnatural. But man, oh man, when you go to different areas in this park where the height variations are not that big. Oops, wrong button. You know, just tiny changes, tiny gaps here and there. Down here, we'll take a look at it, see how it looks. But, I mean, it looks a lot more natural, especially with brown and vegetation thrown around it. It takes the edges off of the sharp pieces. But it looks so natural, and it looks so awesome, and breaks up the grid of your potential mountains and landscapes. So, big shout out. I think it was Low Poly who did most of the work on this park when it came to the cliffs. We've got one other park that we've done mountains on, and these are more like show mountains. So take to consideration, this is not natural. We used more than just the volcano pieces. We used these meteor pieces. So they're pretty bulky looking. Oops. They're pretty bulky looking pieces, but they're just extra brown and extra texture that you can use. So if you look over here, this is supposed to be a fake looking volcano mountain in the middle of the park. And it's not the focal point either. Like, you're supposed to be looking at the coasters coming out, the waterfall. And then I think we did there's some more rock work back here. So yeah, you can see just a tiered approach of the rock work, trying to make it look as natural as possible. I mean, that waterfall looks excellent right there. So keep that in mind when we go back to Wes's entry, the original entry. We just see flat walls, and the textures are repeated, and it just looks clunky. To the newest version, where it still looks pretty clunky. You can still see that sight line of just volcano texture the whole way through, which I'm not a huge fan of, but we're going to do our best to make it a little less of a change. Oops, got some of the water down there. And you throw some of the different land textures in there as well to break that up. You should never have like grass right next to a cliff. Maybe on a golf course, that'd be okay. So let's just do that for now. And then I'll finish up the rest of this over here. You can kind of see over here I left some of the walls present. It'd probably be smarter to maybe even shrink this a little more. Lower it. I could even do some tier work actually. So let's test some of that tier work while I'm on camera. So let's say we do some rock and we lower this to like right here. Let's do ourselves a favor and make the different pieces a little more natural right there. And then we come around, take one of these. Actually, throw that in there. Just break up the texture a little bit. I'm trying to think if I can get away with using something like this. Might have to pull this down a little bit, this rock itself. Then you can see that looks a little odd from that angle, so we'll do the same thing. Throw that, pull that down. Get another object from that angle to break up the angle. I think there's a thick piece that I want to use. Right here. Throw that. Probably throw this back to back. Breaks it up a little bit. I'm not going to say this looks great, but basically getting away with just changing the texture up a little bit. And then, of course, at the top, probably wouldn't have that, so that makes it a little more natural. So, I mean, it's a little bit better at breaking up the rises and the runs. Probably want to continue doing different work, but we're not going to spend much time on Wes's. The biggest thing is planning. When you're planning the park, you want to make sure there's not cliffs like this on the edge. You can get away with having less elevation changes to prevent this from happening. And go look at parks that you appreciate and like the look of and emulate what they're doing. I'd probably go to Grand Glacier if I was building this again and figure out how Low Poly did such a good job at making his so natural. I didn't use any foliage except for one little area over here, and it doesn't look great because there's no foliage anywhere else. So, you know, it would be up to me to figure out placing some more bushes around the area to make it feel less awkward. So, doing this in little gaps, and maybe putting some down here. But in the end, I still feel like this looks awkward as well, because we're just putting it in random spots. We're not thinking about it. And that kind of is a frustrating thing to look at when you're doing or rating a park. It's like, hey, I want this to look organic, but for some reason it just feels weird, and that's because what you're dealing with is a not very well thought out terrain. So no shade to Wes. You know, you were probably building this in a month, not thinking too much of the terrain. Honestly, the terrain's probably the last thing you were thinking about. You were trying to get everything done up here. So keep in mind, we can improve that in the long run. And I'm just going to finish up the rest of this and then call it a day on this episode of the Swag Shack. That'll wrap up this episode of the Swag Shack. We've just got cliffs on the edges. By cliffs, I mean volcano pieces around the edges of this peninsula, whatever you want to call it. We're going to go look at Wes's original. So we'll just have it from here. We'll save the park. Let's load the new one. Let's save it right here. Okay, so this is the before. We've got some pretty standard RCT cliffs. And this is after. And don't get me wrong, I don't think this is the best you can do. There's absolutely more improvements that can be made when it comes to the cliff texture. The thing that comes out the most to me is just how flat and repetitive this area looks on this side. I actually really think this area in here is pretty solid. But man, oh man, those flat walls on this side do not come across very well. It's an improvement when we look at this, and you're like, okay, not too bad over here. But man, oh man, can these cliffs at least somewhat make that large area feel better. I would probably reckon to say this is the most time you'd put into a park for something that's very low-key different. So keep that in mind. It's something that over time you'll develop and get even better at, and you'll see things here and there that you're like, okay, I need to improve that, want to change that up. Biggest thing, pro tip, do not have large height variations on your land. So yeah, hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Please like, comment, and subscribe to the Swag Shack. We'll see you next time.